Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Cloud computing has become very essential when we talk about the Nigerian digital transformation lately. And we see this from across all sectors, from the banking sector to the educational sector, the health sector, transportation sector. But what we do not think about is at what cost is all of this cloud computing affecting, or at what's the cost to the environment, put it in very simple terms. I mean, if you look at the tech landscape in Nigeria, for example, it's rapidly developing and we're seeing lots of new innovations around the clock. And as exciting as that is, we also need to ask the question, what does this mean for our carbon footprint as a country? And that's going to be the focus of today's conversation. Welcome to Greenbytes Wednesday. And if this is the first time you're coming across Greenbytes Wednesday, welcome. We have a series of other episodes for you. And what we do here is to facilitate critical conversations with the hope that these conversations can help you understand clearly your digital footprint or your carbon footprint, can introduce to you some technology tools, trend when it comes to the digital space in Nigeria. Once again, welcome. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I'm very excited to host this conversation. Greenbytes Wednesday is part of the Scale for Net Zero program, and Scale is the Smart Climate Awareness Learning and Empowerment program funded by the UK government in Nigeria. And you can find the podcast wherever you find your podcasts, from Spotify to YouTube to iTunes, wherever it is you find podcasts, you definitely will find the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast also. As I hinted earlier, today's conversation will focus on carbon costs and cloud computing. What does it mean? What's the relationship between these two? And how can we break it in very simple terms such that we can understand where we stand, or sort of how we are contributing to this huge conversation? Not so much talked about, if we're being honest, here on the Nigerian scene. And that's why I'm very excited to have this conversation today, to sort of bring you, to unveil some of the things you probably have never thought about when it comes to cloud computing and the carbon costs that is accrued to it. My guest today is Nasir Ibrahim. Nasir Ibrahim is the fund manager at Palladium, and before that he's worked extensively both on the government side and in the private sector's side also. So he brings very robust experiences into the conversation today. Welcome, Nasir.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
Lovely. Welcome. So let's start by putting it in very simple terms. I've mentioned, yes, carbon costs, and we see this all over the place where people talk about carbon credits and carbon trading. But I would love for you to start by breaking it down. What do we mean when we talk about carbon costs? That's the first question. The second component will then be cloud computing. What exactly does this mean? Let's start by, simplifying these terms.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very timely topic, and as far as the Nigerian scene is concerned, often goes under the radar. But as technology dominates the world, and we begin to see huge trends around cloud computing with data storage, and now emerging with AI and all the algorithms and the training that AI models go through, and the data intensity, and therefore the energy intensity of those processes, it's becoming a very important global sector and a huge consumer of power. In simple terms, when we talk about carbon costs and carbon content, the context is really around CO2 emissions that have historically accrued in the Earth's atmosphere that are increasing the temperature, increasing it to such levels that are increasingly dangerous, and the global community have come together to find solutions. And in simple terms, you want to reduce how much CO2 is released in the atmosphere.
You've very clearly, introduced the concept of carbon and, the cost that goes to it. Maybe we'll still talk a little bit about how do we value this, how is it in the international space, but also in terms of cloud computing, if you had to bring that down, what do
So in terms of cloud computing, it's a very simple relationship. Power generation, which globally is dominated by fossil fuels, coal, gas, petroleum products, is a necessary component for hosting data. You need electricity, which is largely derived from these fossil fuels, to power the GPUs and the CPUs that comprise of data centers across the world.
GPUs mean what?
Graphics processing units. That's now increasingly being important for training AI models. And then you have other computing setups for generally storing data for enterprises and global communications and everything else. The key input to that is electricity, and you need electricity from various sources. And this is largely dominated by fossil fuels. Of course, you have renewable energy in the mix as well, but that is the simple relationship. Data consumes energy, and that energy in the form of electricity, and that electricity is in part produced from fossil fuels that release carbon dioxide. So that's sort of the simple link between the two, and which is why talking about carbon in and around cloud computing is important.
But you hinted on it earlier. What are the sources of carbon dioxide as we know it today? What are the sources?
So the sources are primarily fossil fuels, but you also have deforestation. But when it comes to data and energy production, you're really looking at coal, gas, petroleum products. And it's not only power generation, you also have that in transport. From petrol and diesel, whether it's carbon dioxide or nitrous oxide, and in certain cases, methane. They're all contributors to this. And CO2 is used as sort of a standardized measure for emissions, in that you typically see it's called CO2 equivalent. So you can convert the equivalence of how much methane you emit into CO2. You can convert the equivalence of how much nitrous oxide into CO2 as that global measure. But it's largely around power generation.
What does this mean in terms of progress in the tech space without compromising or without, putting so much burden on the environment?
Yeah, thank you. Globally, cloud computing consumes around or contributes around 1% of global carbon emissions. And that's essentially how much of electricity input into that production is carbon-based. So from gas, coal, and so on. And, that's quite sizable. And given the growing importance and size of that economy, for the requirements for more data, more number crunching with AI, which is going to accelerate the need for data centers significantly, probably far beyond our expectations because of how quickly things are moving. And so it becomes increasingly important. I think key highlights and sort of a good news is that the largest cloud providers, Amazon AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Services, Amazon Azure, they have all made pledges towards carbon neutrality in their data center operations. Some are aiming for 2025 targets, which is this year. We'll see how that goes. Many are aiming for 2030 target. And the way they typically do this is they buy the electricity from renewable energy power providers.
Okay.
And where not possible, they use carbon offsets to compensate for that. So where you can't switch from gas, for example, you pay, you buy carbon credits from the market, and the carbon credits essentially, or the offset credits represents emissions avoided or reduced elsewhere, whether through generation of renewable energy in a different part of the world, or the replanting of trees and sort of regeneration of forests and other ways. And with that, a company is able to balance its emissions. So I think globally, with some of these large tech firms, they are increasingly bringing in renewable energy into the mix. And for Nigeria in particular, the cloud computing sector is fairly nascent. And for an obvious reason being that we have a problem of electricity supply and availability. And, we do have, a number of data centers in the country, largely centered around Lagos, with, Africa data centers. You have, the various data centers, for example, for the undersea cable networks, the telecom providers. Nigeria has a Data Protection Act that mandates certain data, especially government data, to be stored in country. And so trends like this has led to an increase in the number of data centers in the country, consuming 10 megawatts, 20 megawatts of power, and so forth. And it's quite small and nascent, but you'll see an increase in that hopefully in the future. And for data storage and cloud computing, and the most important thing is, well, two sets of things: the cost of power, so how much they pay for the power they produce, they consume. They want to bring it down as low as possible. Second is uptime. You want
What do you mean by uptime?
Uptime, you want high reliability. You don't want your data center to be offline for even a second. So we're talking 99.9% or 999% uptime. And there are different ways to sort of measure this reliability with sort of, I think there's a 4-tier certification where first is sort of basic level, where it doesn't give you all of that. And then the highest being the 4th tier. Typically, companies and data cloud providers, stick to that, 3rd tier that sort of balances the costs and reliability. And you would then have this term that experts call N+1 redundancy, where there's an alternative power source and a cooling source to the main one, so that uptime and reliability is maintained, because it's very important that data centers stay online all the time. And that is the single most important thing. And so for Nigeria, you need to have reliable power supply for data centers, to continue to grow in size. And we have ample opportunity. We have, over 400 gigawatts potential for solar. We have huge potential for hydropower. We only have a few dams, but lots of potential to do that. And looking at gas as a bridge fuel, it's not the most environmentally friendly, but it's considered a bridge fuel in the transition from heavy emitting like fossil fuels to renewable energy with solar, wind, sort of a bridge. And Nigeria has adopted a policy to use gas as a bridge. So we do have that potential to actually leverage these resources that we have, but they have to be affordable for businesses and reliable. And hopefully we do that through renewable energy for the most part.
I was going to touch about the role of the businesses, and I like that you also talked about the policies, which I'll need you to reflect on a bit. But you mentioned some of the big players like Amazon and Google, African Data Center in Nigeria, and a few others. How do you see businesses sort of helping us to move closer to, more environmentally friendly way of doing things when it comes to, yes, we want to keep our data centers 99.99, like you said, but how can we do this in ways that are more environmentally friendly? And what's the role of businesses in this?
Businesses do have a big role, this sort of corporate social responsibility side of things, and you see the big companies leading this. And for Nigerian businesses, they are able to emulate this, but the reality is that they can only work within the infrastructure they have available. And so it's important that the government also plays a role in ensuring that it incentivizes businesses to build data centers, will power them through renewable energy, but also provide all the physical and legal support to ensure that renewable power supply is available and in ample supply. And if that's available and it's in ample supply and it's cheap, affordable, as well, like globally competitive, then you'll see lots of companies using powering data centers in country. And of course, we have the Data Protection Act that mandates certain data to be housed in country. And you find that financial institutions, telecom companies, and others would rather have data centers close to site and close to where they operate. Just better latency and other advantages. So as the economy grows and digital economy grows, and generally speaking, there's economic growth in the country, you would naturally see the need for more data centers. But you have to have the incentives for businesses to be able to follow suit. And it's a global economy, and you have very competitive countries providing the right environment, renewable energy with the right pricing. And so we have to be able to compete in order to attract businesses, because anyone can operate a data center anywhere in the world. All you need is to connect it to the internet, and they have their ways of managing that. Ultimately, cloud computing is essentially computing through somebody else's computer. That's pretty much what it means, right? In this case, of course, with the huge data needs, it's data centers, but they're just computers. You have a bunch of series of CPUs, GPUs, whatever you call it, crunching numbers and doing calculations. That's really what it means, right?
So yeah. So when you sit there and you watch this on YouTube, or you're listening to this via Spotify, or you're just sending the link on WhatsApp, it means that all of this is made possible because some other computers in some places are working. Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly it.
As we take this conversation, because I know you have to run, Nasir Ibrahim, I want to say thank you so much for this thoughts. You made mention about this policy. Could you reflect on it a little bit?
It's a national policy to protect data in the country, and especially government data and sensitive information, personal data for especially telecom users, and identity of Nigerians, very personal and important data. The laws are meant to protect this data and house it in country, so that we create a moat around data, because with hacking and lots of lots of espionage that happens through the digital economy, that protection is necessary. And of course, to also incentivize digital economy in the country with data centers and everything. So that's really what the government intends to do, but really to just protect Nigerians, and yeah,
and see that we are not compromised, and that we still all have all-round access to these systems. Thank you so much indeed, Mr. Nasir Ibrahim. We talk about the energy components of these, but not so much that we talk about the fact that it needs a lot of water. I once read that for every 100 word you input on ChatGPT, it consumes about 25 liters of water. And that tells you how many people are sort of, engaging different platforms, putting so much energy pressure on these cloud systems. And what does that mean for water availability? What does that mean for the cooling systems? So maybe you could reflect very quickly on that. And then we move to emerging business technologies that are sort of helping us get things right.
Yeah. Absolutely. The cooling side often goes unnoticed. The focus tends to be on the amount of electric power required to just operate these computers or the machines, data center hardware. But these are hardware that heat up, and you need cooling. Same way you need cooling for your personal computer, whether it's through a fan or another technology. Same thing in basic principles. And that also requires a lot of power. And whether it's cooling through air conditioning, which tends to not be the most efficient, or emerging cooling technologies like liquid cooling technologies that reduce the amount of power required, and with certain really interesting new ways of providing cooling solutions, even require less water to maintain and provide the cooling services. So that reduces the pressure on the water supply, especially in the local area of the data centers hosting. But there's also another part that often goes under the radar, and that is e-waste.
Say again?
E-waste.
E-waste,
Yes. So these are electric components. In many cases, you find very toxic chemicals and toxic metals, and that after a data center gets disposed of, where do they go? What happens to all of that. It's, similar story around, consumer electronic products, phones, TVs, and, those that get produced in the billions and get disposed of in the billions every year. What happens to those? They're very important things to talk about, in addition to, of course, the carbon intensity. So yeah, it's the e-waste side of things that is an important matter, and that circular economy concept really needs to be adopted. And I think that the circular economy concept provides a good way to look at solutions. Okay, in that what you want to do is minimize waste to the extent possible, and lots of components can be recycled. Lots of components can be repurposed for other uses. And then whatever else that can't really be used, that needs to be disposed of safely and in a way that does not affect the environment. It has costs associated with it. The cheapest way to dispose of things is simply dump them in a dump site, right? Nobody wants that, especially with such electronic components. So there is a cost to it. And if you're, doing more recycling and repurposing, you extract value from, what would typically be considered value less waste. And so it reduces the cost of disposal, and whatever needs to be disposed of without any solutions can then be disposed of. And then, in aggregate, reduces the cost of disposal. And, there's lots of global efforts to make sure that that side of things is sustainable, but we have to do more. The same way that we have to do more with reducing the carbon intensity of these industrial processes, and in this case, computing.
Yeah, and I struggle a lot with the idea that we don't have infrastructures in place to sort of get people to dispose of their e-waste, for example. We just lump all of this waste together also, and so I think perhaps there could be some innovations around structured mechanisms of collecting e-waste, having infrastructures in place that makes it possible for people to say, hey, I have a pile of this, and they are mostly e-waste or digital waste, and I know that this is where to take it to. Probably an area that we need to also invest in as we sort of think about moving towards the future. Just before we go, I was going to talk a little bit about emerging trends, but I think I'll connect this primarily to the work that you do at Palladium. You're the fund manager, and Palladium is a UK funded project, as I understand. But walk us through it. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and then we connect it with the bigger scope of just transition, net zero, moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a fund manager at Palladium. Palladium is a private consulting firm with global operations. And in my particular role, I'm managing UK Pact in Nigeria. UK Pact stands for UK Partnering for Accelerated Climate Transitions. And it's part of the UK government's international climate finance portfolio, where it funds in the billions of pounds technical assistance to emerging economies and countries around the world to take that low carbon development pathway. And at the moment, with UK Pact, we are supporting 10 countries across the world and 2 regional funds. There's a long list of countries. Nigeria is one of them, and it's 3 in Africa. So there's Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And we have countries in Latin America and Southeast Asia that's also under the program. And it's a technical assistance facility from the UK government to provide support to governments. In the case of Nigeria, the Nigerian government to achieve its climate ambitions. So the Nigerian government has a target of net zero carbon emissions by 2060, and nationally determined contributions that comprise of reduction in emissions in a number of sectors: power generation, land use, water, agriculture, waste, water. So it's quite comprehensive, and the aim of the program is to support the government in making this happen by providing embedded expertise, so sending experts to government to work within government agencies to help and support them with particular priorities, but to also fund projects implemented by nonprofits, university research institutes, private companies to test out new models, train provide trainings in particular sectors of interest, and really finding holistic solutions that can help in accelerating this transition for Nigeria. And so that's my role in country, providing this technical backstop and implementing the program on behalf of the UK government.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but do you think 2060 is a realistic target for Nigeria?
It is achievable. It is achievable with concerted effort and global collective action. What we do know is that it's a two-way relationship. Okay, the Nigerian government has to prioritize this, and it's doing its part, whether through the right policies or the funding. But the international community also have to do their part by providing all the support and the funding for Nigeria and other countries. We are a developing country, and we have ambitions on economic growth and development in general, and really reducing poverty, increasing unemployment, and all of the economic challenges that we have in the country. The thesis, and is a plausible one, is that this can be achieved without affecting the environment or without increasing carbon emissions significantly, because you're able to bring in more renewable energy, you're able to protect forests and take up sustainable practices. You can have climate smart agriculture, efficient waste management, and everything else, while ramping up, industrial production and other commerce that can help take Nigeria out of the situation it's in, reduce poverty, and just have this sustainable development. It is possible, but it requires concerted effort across board, and it's a collective action thing that everybody plays a part, and they have to play a part collectively for that puzzle to be solved and all the pieces put together. It is doable. It's quite ambitious, but with the necessary action, with funding and dedication, it's something that can be achieved.
Interesting. I like your optimism, and I know that this is also part of what the president expressed at the Sustainability Summit recently. So yes, what will be your closing thoughts, Nasir Ibrahim? As I thank you so much again for all that you've shared. But what will be your closing thoughts?
Interesting question. And I think a key closing thought would be to just say that everyone has a role to play. You have a role to play. I have a role to play. Everyone listening to this series also has a role to play. And it's only by all playing our roles that we can achieve this, whether as responsible citizens, doing the right thing, calling the government to action, and so many other ways that an individual in a democratic governance system has the leverage and the ability to create change and effect change. We all have a role to play, and people in government, our private sector leaders, our traditional leaders, everyone has a role to play. I think that's the key message, because often it's easy to think, oh, this is a big problem and it's somebody else's headache. Go figure it out. It is every single person's headache, especially for something as big a challenge as climate change, being possibly an existential crisis that affects everyone in the world, and therefore it's our responsibility collectively, without exception, to make this work.
John, thank you so much, Nasir Ibrahim, for the thoughts, the insights that you've shared. Big thanks to the team, Ayo, Ajibola, and Wonderful, that has coordinated all of this. And lastly, I want to say thanks to the UK government for making it possible for us to bring this series of educational thoughts and episodes to you out there. Until the next time, like you said, let's get to work. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesdays. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the SCALE initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, Test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.